StudyIQ IAS, अब तैयारी हुई अफोर्डेबल.
That center is a geographical fiction. Real action takes place in states.
But I think the incidents of use of 356, they have come down quite dramatically. If you look at this entire decade, this happened when Mr. Kalyan Singh became the Chief Minister for the second time. The governor of the state sent a recommendation to central government to dismiss this state government. And especially in the context of All India Service Officers, both the IAS, the IPS and the Forest Service Officers are recruited by the center through the UPSC, appointed by the President of India, but allocated to a state cadre. Mr. Arun Jaitley used to talk to chief ministers, tell them what is in it for them. On one occasion, he invited me to his residence to convince Mr. Naveen Patnaik about what was in it for them. Governor is a representative of the center. But if evidently he takes an obstructionist view, then governance will suffer.
Hello everyone. Welcome to podcast 10 of IAS Behind the Scenes. हमारे साथ हैं मिस्टर अनिल स्वरूप सर. आज का हमारा टॉपिक है कि सेंटर स्टेट रिलेशंस किस तरीके से जो व्यवहारिक पहलू है, यानी कि जो प्रैक्टिकल यू कैन से एप्लीकेशन है गवर्नेंस का, उसमें क्या चैलेंजेस लेकर आते हैं. सेंटर स्टेट रिलेशंस आपके यूपीएससी सिविल सर्विस एग्जाम में इंडियन पॉलिटी का एक अहम भाग है. आमतौर पर जब भारत राजनीति के बारे में आप कुछ समझ बनाना चाहते हैं तो सेंटर स्टेट रिलेशंस समझ लीजिए कि फाउंडेशन है. वेलकम टू द शो सर. स्टार्टिंग विद one line that you have written in your article, that center is a geographical fiction. Real action takes place in states. तो सर आप कह रहे हैं कि सेंटर एक लीगल ज्योग्राफिकल फिक्शन है, जबकि इंटरेस्टिंग है कि हमारी कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली ने यूनिटरी फीचर्स दिए हैं, राइट, नॉट यूजिंग द वर्ड फेडरल, क्वासी फेडरल एक कमेंट आता है. तो आपका इस पर क्या पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू है, किस तरीके से ये ब्यूरोक्रेसी को शेप करता है?
In my personal view, I think the constitution makers were absolutely correct. Because though we are a federal country, the positioning is towards the unitary nature. So more powers are with the center than with the states. Given the nature of our country, given the diversity of our country, it was required that we had a strong center. Yes. But for the same reason, because of the diversity, a lot of power had to be given even to the local leaders, so to say, so as to cater to the local requirement. So the attempt has been to balance between the two. So if you compare with the American Constitution, in America, the states are very powerful in their own way, but not so powerful in India. So given the context in which Constitution was formulated, I think they took the right decision. But when I say what I have said and what you've quoted about center being a fiction, the underlying idea behind the statement was that ultimately people act and get benefited in a state. So when we talk in terms of a physical condition, it's the state where the action actually happens. I think center is a legal fiction in the sense that it has been created by a constitutional provision. Otherwise, geographically, there is no center, so to say.
Exactly.
All action exists in the state. And hence, it leads to the next point, that the relationship between the center and the state has to be cordial one, or has to be in a manner that the states function as they can or as they should. So center has a very important role to play in recognizing the fact that these entities are as important as the center itself. Hence, center-state relations are extremely, extremely critical for proper and good governance and delivery of what the governments, respective governments, whether central or the state government, want to deliver for the common man.
सर ने एक स्टेटमेंट यूज करी कि सेंटर रिकॉग्नाइजिंग दैट स्टेट्स आर एज इम्पोर्टेंट एज सेंटर इज. आई थिंक दिस इज द बेस ऑफ फेडरलिज्म. सर आर्टिकल 356 से शुरू करते हैं. आर्टिकल 356 के बारे में कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली में पहले से ही काफ़ी डिबेट थी. देयर वाज दिस आइडिया कि इसका मिसयूज हो सकता है और इससे जो फेडरल रिलेशन है कि जिसकी हमने अभी बात की वो नेगेटिवली इम्पैक्ट होगा. डॉक्टर बी आर अम्बेडकर का कहना था कि नहीं, ये रेयरली ही यूज होगा, मतलब इट्स लाइक इट इज़ गोइंग टू बी लाइक अ डेड लेटर, दैट्स द वर्ड ही यूज्ड. लेकिन जैसे ही हमने आगे देखा और स्पेशली हमने 60s ऑनवर्ड्स की भारत की राजनीति को देखा, तो उसके बाद हमने आर्टिकल 356 का मिसयूज देखा. तो सर आपने भी उस समय सर्व किया है जब आर्टिकल 356 लागू हो रहा था. तो आपका इस पर क्या व्यू है और किस तरीके से आपने कुछ एग्जाम्पल देंगे, रियल एग्जाम्पल की किस तरीके से गवर्नेंस को इम्पैक्ट करता है ये?
You know, laws or constitutional provisions are enablers. Now, if there is a political misuse of those enabling provisions, then obviously that was not the purpose of such laws. So I think 356 was required. Because if there is such a situation as has been outlined in 356, there would be need for a president's rule. But fortunately in India, as we are an evolving democracy, I think we've matured as far as use of 356 is concerned. If you look at the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, the ease with which 356 was used is no more done now. Very rarely do you find a situation where people go for that. And also, the future leaders also recognize the fact that it should not be used just like that as it was done earlier. And hence, there were constitutional amendments to this effect on how Article 356 has to be used. And I'm so glad that it was done, because the abuse, I should use, that was happening earlier in the 70s and the 80s has virtually stopped now. Now you don't find even, I mean, in my personal view, in Manipur, there should have been president's rule. But even in that situation, Article 356 was not used. What happened at some point in West Bengal, had it been 70s or 80s, I think the central government would have imposed president's rule, but they didn't. So I think there is maturity in our political leaders, in this at least context, where Article 356 is not being misused as it was used earlier. So in any democracy, the legal or the constitutional provision provide you the basis on which it gets built. But as politics matures, the misuse tends to get cut down, and Article 356, to my mind, is a clear example where we can see maturity taking place.
इस पे सर एक काउंटर ओपिनियन आती है कि इज इट मैच्योरिटी इन आवर पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप और दिस इज अबाउट सम पॉलिटिकल यू कैन से डायनामिक्स पर से, कि मणिपुर की बात करें और सेंटर की बात करें तो रूलिंग पार्टी का सेम होना क्या एक इसमें ये एक रीज़न था, और इससे पहले उत्तराखंड में भी आर्टिकल 356 मतलब उसका रीज़न था वो पॉलिटिकल डिफेक्शंस, वो वाला सिनेरियो, उसके बाद प्रेसिडेंट रूल का रिकमेंड होना, फिर उत्तराखंड की हाई कोर्ट द्वारा उसको रद्द किया जाना, तो ये भी हमने इसी दौरान देखा है.
No, I agree with you. See, I am not saying that it has become perfect, that
जी,
use of 356. I'm just comparing it with what was happening in the 70s and 80s. Given that background, I think we have improved.
yes,
Obviously, as we mature further, probably even that misuse will stop. But you know, in an evolving democracy, there would be such situations
जी,
where it may be difficult to justify the action that has been taken. The ruling party would obviously try and justify. But I think the incidents of use of 356, they have come down quite dramatically. If you look at this
Yes, yes.
entire decade.
yeah, and I think we can give some credit to judiciary as well. SR Bommai case, judiciary said कि
Yes.
rarely इसका इस्तेमाल होना
That
चाहिए.
I think is the job of the judiciary.
यस यस यस, और तभी कहा जाता है कि सेंटर स्टेट रिलेशंस, आप फेडरलिज्म की बात करेंगे तो उसका एक की पिलर होता है इंडिपेंडेंट जुडिशरी, उसके बिना नहीं हो पाएगा. सर, स्टूडेंट्स जो हैं सुनना चाहेंगे कि क्या कैसे वो गवर्नेंस को इम्पेक्ट करता है, मतलब एक्चुअली ग्राउंड पर क्या इम्प्लीकेशन होता है, क्योंकि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का कैसे इस्तेमाल होता है, पॉलिटिकल डायनेमिक्स कैसे वर्क करते हैं, वो इन जनरल वो न्यूज़ में पढ़ते हैं, बट रियल कोई एग्जाम्पल कि देखो अगर प्रेसिडेंट रूल लगा तो देखो इस वजह से ये इम्पैक्ट होता है.
You know, it depends on the context in which president's rule is imposed. Let me give you an example from the state where I come from, UP.
जी जी,
I was in a critical position when president's rule were imposed after the demolition of Babri Masjid. I think anyone would have come to that conclusion that given the background, it had to.
जी,
So, to provide some stability in the social context, in the law and context, it was necessary for that. Now, president's rule for tackling an emergent situation may be required, but president's rule cannot continue for a very long time, because ultimately, in a democracy, it's the people who matter, and president's rule is not of the people.
yes,
What it does is, it gives time to the administration to restore normalcy before elections can happen. And it happened, and then normalcy was restored. In UP, it happened. Look at another example where there was an attempt to impose president's rule against a democratically elected government without any major event happening. This happened when Mr. Kalyan Singh became the chief minister for the second time. The governor of the state sent a recommendation to central government to dismiss this state government. And it was one of the rare cases where the President of India did not accept the recommendation of the cabinet. Cabinet also recommended, and he didn't. And ultimately, President's rule was not imposed.
You are saying that Union Council of Ministers said that you should accept?
For President's rule, the recommendation has to come from
Union Cabinet. Yes, Union Cabinet.
And if you recall, after 1977, the Constitution was amended that the President has the authority to send back the proposal for rethinking.
Yeah.
Earlier it was not so. Earlier he was bound. He can send it once. He sent it back.
Okay.
And thereafter, the political situation was such that the cabinet did not recommend it again. It could have.
Yes.
So that was a well worth an amendment because it gives time for people and the decision makers to reflect. So as I say, our constitution has also evolved, and this is a very good provision that has been there, that though President is bound by the advice of the cabinet, at least in such cases, he can send it back for reconsideration, which he did. And then the cabinet did not move again. So President's rule was not imposed. Now, what does this do? If such things happen very frequently, then the administration is in a fix.
Yes.
Because the overall guidance is given by the political or people at the top. And that guidance goes missing as to what is the direction to do. I mean, civil service acts upon those decisions or that guidance. But if you have this uncertainty at the top level, then there wouldn't be any guidance available, and it impacts the administration. These are extreme cases, but in usual cases also, there could be problems. So, for example, the case that happened in West Bengal. So, I must give you a bit of a background of that, because that also reflects on how center-state relations work. And everyone knows that these days it's the relationship between the center state.
Yeah. So before we go there, sir, एक छोटा सा पॉइंट है कि जैसे आपने कहा कि पॉलिटिकल जो गाइडेंस है वो मिस हो जाती है अगर गवर्नर रूल लग गया. सर प्रैक्टिकली उस समय पर क्या गवर्नर जो अलग अलग डिपार्टमेंट के ऑफिसर्स हैं, यू बीइंग सेक्रेटरी टू अ पर्टिकुलर डिपार्टमेंट, तो आपकी डायरेक्ट मीटिंग फिर गवर्नर लेते हैं? और
Okay, I'll explain this to you. What happens in a president's rule? In a president's rule, there are advisors that are appointed. These advisors, by and large, hold portfolios of cabinet ministers. So instead of having a cabinet of 40, 50, there will be 3-4 advisors who each of one would be given around 10, 12 departments. So he acts like a minister. And the council of the advisors with the governor as the head acts as the cabinet.
And who are these advisors?
Advisors are by and large bureaucrats.
Bureaucrats, senior bureaucrats.
So it's instead of political functioning of the state, it becomes a bureaucratic functioning of the state. And by and large, they are retired civil servants from the police, from the IAS, who become these advisors, and files are submitted to the advisors. Now, there again, like in any government, the chief minister decides what has to be the distribution of work. The governor decides what is the distribution of the work. He can safely say that the file need not be routed through advisors and the file be sent to him directly. That's his discretion, the president's discretion. If I remember, there were 2 occasions when I was there in UP, the files always went through the advisors. So they were giving different departments, file is submitted to them as would be submitted to a cabinet minister there. And then he submits it to the governor. If the allocation is work such, some of the decisions are allowed to be taken by the advisor himself. Or some of them will go to the governor, as is the case in rules of business, usually with the chief minister and the ministers.
Yes. So means our constitution and this rules of business have ensured that governance work is not going to get hampered or stalled. It is going to continue.
Technically it is not. Technically everything appears to be fine. It takes over. But practically what happens is long-term decisions would not be taken because they are political decisions, long-term implications. So you would rarely see a new scheme being announced in the governor's rule.
But continuity
is maintained, or whatever is going on, it continues.
So now you were talking about this West Bengal.
No, now I'm coming to the informal relationship that gets spoiled in case center-state relations are not doing well. So it can lead to impact on governance. And especially in the context of All India Service Officers, both the IAS, the IPS and the Forest Service Officers are recruited by the center through the UPSC, appointed by the President of India, but allocated to a state cadre. So they are on the administrative control of the state government till such time they come on deputation to the center. So they occupy a very peculiar position which is not there anywhere in the world. Nowhere in the world that someone else recruits, someone else appoints, and he works somewhere else. It doesn't work. And it has worked so well so far. But of late there have been problems. And one example that I was telling you was about what happened in West Bengal. And what had happened was that the Prime Minister was visiting the state. And as per the usual protocol, the Chief Minister and the Chief Secretary should have received him. And that's the protocol. Now, Chief Minister in her wisdom chose not to receive the Prime Minister nor attend his meeting. Now, that's a political decision. It is nowhere written down clearly, but that's the protocol that is usually followed. That's the practice. So in the absence of Chief Minister or even in the presence of the Chief Minister, the Chief Secretary should have been there. Now, the key issue here was that the Chief Minister asked the Chief Secretary not to attend the meeting. Now, the critical point was whether the Chief Secretary should have disobeyed his Chief Minister and attended the meeting. My personal view here is, at that point in time, the Chief Secretary was under the administrative control of the state government.
Exactly.
If I were him, I would have advised the Chief Minister, I would have tried to convince him. But ultimately, if she took a decision of not allowing me to go there is no way that I could have ended in the meeting. Now, I don't know what transpired, whether he tried to convince the Chief Minister. I'm assuming he would have. What did the Chief Minister say? I'm not privy to all that. But my assumption is that he cannot be held liable for not attending the meeting of the Chief Minister if the Chief Minister had expressly told him not to attend the meeting.
Exactly.
Because he was under the administrative control.
Yes.
The tragedy is now he's being held liable for not attending. I mean, I see it as a tragedy because All India service officers, though appointed by the central government, when they are with the state government, they are allocated to the state cadre.
Yes.
And they are under the supervision and control of that. It creates a piquant situation. What that does is that if you start taking action against senior officers, All India service or otherwise, then it impacts the governance. Now, if All India service officers are only looking at the center for the guidance, imagine if the central government starts issuing directives to the All India service officers directly to do things. It will lead to chaos in the states. And the idea here was that so long as they are part of the state government, they will do what the state government does, so long as what is being told to him or her is not illegal. If something illegal was being said by the chief minister there, then of course he would have been right to disobey her and come here. But there was no legality. There was no legality here actually. She said,
yes,
you don't attend the meeting, you be with me. He had to be with her. So it creates problems there. You know, I say that because the constitution makers and even otherwise did visualize situations where there would not be harmony between center and state. But if both the center and the state take steps to ensure that there's no harmony, then who's going to suffer? Ultimately, the common man suffers. So, you know, I saw how a person like Mr. Arun Jaitley, late Mr. Arun Jaitley, he was so sagacious, you know, his sagacity was admirable. How he engaged with opposition chief minister, I saw it firsthand. And the manner in which he engaged with them to get them on board. So I distinctly remember an instance when we were trying to push a coal block auction legislation in the parliament where the ruling party did not have majority in Rajya Sabha. So they wanted support from other parties that were not a part of NDA. So I distinctly recall that Mr. Arun Jaitley was engaging with the chief ministers. That is how it should be. You know, law can say that do this, do that, and this is right, this is wrong. But there's a lot of gray area. That's where, you know, your capacity to engage with people, to convince them about your arguments comes to the fore. And that's what he did. And that is what is required. There would always be difference of opinion between two individuals, between two brothers, between two states, between states. Difference of opinion are natural in democracy. Exactly. The question is, how do you resolve those differences? Whether you sit down across a table, try to appreciate the point of view of others, and try to convince them with your arguments. That's what democracy is all about. You can't presume that they're opposition and I'm in proposition, so we can't see eye to eye. All-out effort first should be made to ensure that there is a harmonious relationship. There could still be cracks, some cracks, there should still be difference of opinion, there could still be some rancor, but if the assumption is that he is from opposition and he won't agree with me, then it's wrong. I again, in the same context, I distinctly remember that Mr. Arun Jaitley used to talk to chief ministers, tell them what is in it for them. On one occasion, he invited me to his residence to convince Mr. Naveen Patnaik about what was in it for them. So the key here is, when you engage in a dialogue with the states, you have to convey a value proposition to them.
Exactly.
You can't say that the bigger boss and I'm saying it, hence you should do it. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
If you are able to convince the adversary, in this case could be a state, then the chances are that what you're saying will be implemented in letter and spirit. Otherwise, it will be seen as a diktat and they will somehow try to duck it. It's unfortunate if that happens. That is happening now in some of the cases, which is impacting administration. So, for example, governors sitting on files for months together, state governments having to go to Supreme Court to direct the governor to clear the files. I don't think it has happened in the past. Why should it happen now? Again, as I say, there could be different opinion on issues. The effort should be to find solutions. What is happening in Delhi state, and the government of Delhi and the governor here, what has happened between governor of Tamil Nadu and the center, what is happening between governor of West Bengal and the state government,
and Kerala.
as I said, in Kerala. These things ultimately impact administration, because then decisions would not be taken. When a file is sent to the governor, the idea is to take a decision. Otherwise, why would a file go to very few file go to governor for information. Most of the file goes, either it's a legislation or a decision in which governor has to put his stamp. I'm not saying that he should agree with everything. But my contention is, if there is a disagreement, then there is a way to resolve that disagreement instead of two parties going to the court. Now, two parts of a government, if they go to Supreme Court for a decision, then you are wasting Supreme Court's time, you're wasting your own time, and you're doing injustice to the people. So, this solution has to be found across the table.
Yeah. So what are the solutions here, sir? Means a lot of, you can say, debate about this is in context of political situation which prevails, or is per already we have Saria Commission, Punchi Commission recommendation, but...
No, I don't think Saria and Punchi commissions can solve this problem. As I say, there would be some issues which may politically impact something. One can understand and appreciate there could be a disagreement, but there are administrative issues, there are welfare issues.
Yeah.
Why is, as I gathered, this is hearsay, that when the issue came before the Supreme Court recently, there were files that belonged to, or that were for welfare of the people. They were very important decisions to be taken. So the governor at best can point out that this is where I disagree. Also, there is a clear protocol. If he disagrees, what happens thereafter, whether it comes again and how it happens, it's laid down. But if the governor sits on the file, then it's not going anywhere.
It means, sorry to interrupt, it means you're suggesting that there should be mention of a particular timeline within which objections or recommendations need to be mentioned.
This is a legalistic way of finding solution to the problem. I think it has more to do with the understanding of individuals there. Because you put a time frame, then again they will find some way of not doing things. So whereas it is, it could help, listing out this, by this time if you don't do it, it will be treated as okay.
Deemed passed.
It can be done, but I think it's more to do with law, more to do with rules and regulation. And as has happened in case of 356, the country has matured as a democracy. I think in such cases also, some maturity has to be there. You can't, governor is the representative of the center. But if evidently he takes an obstructionist view, then governance will suffer.
Yes.
So you can still have a rule, legalistically you can say 10 days or 15 days. But if the governor has this mentality, or under some directive he has this mentality, then no rule can prevent him from doing that. You make any rule.
So there has been this recommendation emerging from Saria and Punchi Commission that the major issue is that the governor is acting as agent of center, और पॉलिटिकल बायस इज देयर. तो ऐसे में क्योंकि ही सर्व्स और शी सर्व्स ऑन प्लेजर ऑफ प्रेसिडेंट, तो अगर उनकी टेन्योर को फिक्स कर दिया जाए या उनका रिमूवल का प्रोसेस ऐसा कर दिया जाए जैसा सुप्रीम कोर्ट हाई कोर्ट जजेस का है, ऐसा कुछ चेंज कर दिया जाए, तो ऐसे में दे मे एक्चुअली एक्ट इंडिपेंडेंट.
You can do that. You can do that. I mean, certainly it would be an improvement of what we are. But, you look at Mr. Gogoi as the Justice of the Supreme Court. He has all the security and everything. Look at what he did and look at the way he was treated.
Yes.
So it won't stop everyone from doing it, but probably it will improve if tenure is fixed. I mean, it has been debated whether, though he should be representative of the center, if the tenure is fixed, because he's at the pleasure of the president, he can be shifted any time.
Yes.
So he will jolly well obey what the center says. Yes, that may be an improvement on the current situation. But I think it's more to do with maturity. See, I keep going back to Article 356 because there we have a classic example of evolving maturity. I mean, the misuse of 356 was phenomenal. Now you don't see that misuse. Why? Because one, the provisions of the constitution have also been changed, because you can't have emergency imposed without the approval of the parliament with certain percentage of votes and all. But apart from that, I think politically also, they've started thinking that if you dismiss the government, they may come back.
Yes.
If they come back, then it's embarrassment.
Yes.
So dismissal is now fortunately not being taken as a route under 356.
जुडिशियल रिव्यू वहाँ पर चेंज कर देता चीज़ों को. सर, आपने एक इम्पोर्टेंट इशू उठाया कि देखो, सेंटर के पास पावर है टू रिक्रूट, मतलब टू अपॉइंट, टू एलोकेट द कैडर, और जो DOPT, डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ पर्सनल एंड ट्रेनिंग एंड UPSC, दे मेजरली अगर किसी IAS का टर्मिनेशन होना है तो वही करेंगे. मेजर कार्डर कंट्रोलिंग DOPT. स्टेट आपको सस्पेंड कर सकती है, ट्रांसफर कर सकती है. अभी कुछ टाइम पहले एक किस्सा हुआ था, उत्तर प्रदेश का ही है, दुर्गा शक्ति नागपाल वाला केस था. तो उस टाइम पर वन ऑफ द सीनियर मिनिस्टर सेड कि सेंटर अपने IAS IPS ऑफिसर्स ले ले, ऑल इंडिया सर्विस ऑफिसर वाले ले ले, और हम अपने स्टेट सर्विस के ऑफिसर्स से प्रदेश को चला लेंगे. सो यू हैव वर्कड इन UP, दो वी नो व्हाट आर्टिकल 312 सेज, बट डू यू सी कि कुछ ऐसे चेंजेस चाहिए ब्यूरोक्रेटिक, मतलब IAS IPS और जो स्टेट सर्विसेज हैं, डू यू सी कि कुछ चेंजेस ऐसे होने चाहिए कि ये जो बीच बीच में क्लैशेस होते हैं सेंटर स्टेट के बीच में ऑन ब्यूरोक्रेसी, इनका कोई सोल्यूशन निकले?
See, first of all, that statement of the minister is very unfortunate.
जी.
I mean, there is a rationale behind all India services, and Sardar Patel had spoken eloquently about why should you have all India services. So there is a reason, because the experience that he gets, that officer gets in the state, and when he comes to the center state relation hinges on this bureaucratic existence also. So it provides a connect between the center. If it becomes a disconnect, then there is a problem.
Yes.
So what the minister said was more of a disconnect. Why? Because not so much as the minister. If the center conveys to the state that all India service officers are not going to listen to you, they're going to listen to us, they will be trouble. But that was not the purpose. So this message should never be conveyed that they belong to us and they will obey our orders, irrespective of what you say. This definition, if it is defined in this manner, then we'll have to do away with all India service, because states will continue to say that they are not listening to me. This has fortunately not happened. I think, barring exceptions like what happened in West Bengal and elsewhere, I think it has worked very well. When an all India service officer works in a state, it works with the state government, and they've contributed substantially. And with that experience, they come to the center and help formulation of policies here. So it's worked very well.
Yes.
I don't think there is any major change required. It's more to do with the attitude of people rather than any structural major change to be required to be done for that relationship. You know, most of the relationships, like in marriage also, is legal marriage. But some marriages succeed, some don't.
Yes.
Law is still there. You can't make a law for a marriage to succeed. No?
Yes.
You can make a law for a marriage to exist, but to succeed and all has to do with human relations. And that is true of politics as well. I think a lot needs to be done in terms of maturing yourself. And as I keep going back to 356, which is a great example of political maturity, similar maturity will have to come for all India services officers and even otherwise by handling. Why treat states as enemies? Why should there be a war between center and state? You know, there was a crazy incident of a central cabinet minister being arrested in Maharashtra a few months ago. Why should that happen? It happened because the center started arresting the cabinet minister of the state. Now, if this happens, I'm not saying what was right, what was wrong. I think the whole attitude and approach is wrong. After all, the ultimate purpose of governance is the people. And they will suffer if the center and state are at war with each other. There have to be more people like Arun Jaitley to sit around and bring them together. There could still be exceptions, but I think there are more such incidents emerging, which is very, very disturbing.
ब्रॉडली जब हम सेंटर स्टेट रिलेशंस की बात करते हैं तो उसमें 3 एस्पेक्ट पर बात होती है, लेजिस्लेटिव, एग्जीक्यूटिव और फिर फाइनेंशियल वाले एस्पेक्ट पे बात होती है. तो हमारे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन फ्रेमर्स ने बड़े ब्यूटीफुली इसको कैटेगराइज किया गया है, किया हुआ है, बट देर आर केसेस ऑफ एम्बिगिटी. सर, एक पॉइंट उठता है कि व्हेन इट कम्स टू फाइनेंसेस, तो मेजर रेवेन्यूज ऑफ रेवेन्यू एक्चुअली दैट गोज टू सेंटर, और उसके बाद फिर वो एलोकेशन होता है. तो वहाँ पर बार्गेनिंग फेडरलिज्म का एक फैक्टर काम करता आया है, जिसकी वजह से कुछ ऐसे स्टेट्स जहाँ पर शायद ज़्यादा ग्रांट्स मिल सकते थे, लेकिन इस वजह से नहीं जाते बिकॉज दे आर नॉट पार्ट ऑफ कोलिशन विच इज रूलिंग इंडिया. तो उस पर आपका क्या?
So let us look at it. The major part of allocation is pre-decided through the finance commission. That decides. Then there are discretionary funds, so to say, under various schemes, which are given by the center to the state. That is where all the play happens.
जी.
One state could be discriminated against the other state. And this is nothing new, it has happened in the past. There again, there has to be political maturity. After all, people in the opposition ruled states are also people of this country.
जी.
No rule can decide that. Rules have already defined the finance commission part. There no one can mess with them. They very clearly, and majority of the funds flow through that formula that is decided. The other funds through various central government schemes that go to the state governments, that's where the central government plays. Sometimes, the center becomes overactive in discriminating. Sometimes they're not so overactive. Again, this will come through majority. And this, this complaint of the states is nothing new. It has happened in the past. It is happening even now. Some states say that we have been discriminated against. My view is, politically you do whatever you want to do, but why play the future of the people of that particular state? Again, it requires a lot of sagacity to do that. For example, when we were doing coal block auction, I used to tell the chief ministers, and many of them were from the opposition ruled states, that not a single penny is coming to the central government. Though we are auctioning the mines for you, we are taking all the trouble. The entire royalty goes to you. Now, this many people were not aware. Once we told them, then Mr. Naveen Patnaik came on board. Miss Mamata Banerjee came on board. West Bengal also technically agreed with us. They may not have supported there in the parliament, but they agreed. So if you employ right communication channels, if you try and convince them, the area comes down, area of disagreement comes down. Right now you have this much area. If you communicate with them, the area will be smaller. I can't visualize a situation where everyone agrees with everyone. It won't happen. It doesn't happen anywhere. So we have to reduce that area as much as possible, and hence you require people like late Arun Jaitley to do that.
Yes. सर, अगर हम सम अप करें तो जितने हमने पॉइंट्स बताए, तो कुछ जगह लीगल चेंजेस से हम कुछ हद तक इंस्टेंसेस को कम कर सकते हैं, लेकिन मेजरली हमारा कंक्लूजन निकलता है दैट वी नीड एआई, attitudinal intelligence.
Yes.
As you have suggested earlier.
Yes, attitude.
Yeah. So on this point, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Giving your time. Thank you everyone. आप शेयर कर सकते हैं कमेंट्स में आपके क्या व्यू हैं इस पॉइंट पे, और आपके कुछ सवाल हो तो प्लीज आस्क. नेक्स्ट सेशन में वी आर गोइंग टू आस्क दोज क्वेश्चंस फ्रॉम सर बाय टेकिंग योर नेम. टेक केयर. जय हिंद.
StudyIQ IAS. अब तैयारी हुई अफोर्डेबल.